The first Death Hand Request was in my opinion one of Compile Art's best games, right behind Fairy Fencer. It was dark, compelling, intriguing, had an engaging story and cast of characters, and a really fun battle system. Despite a few flaws with the level design, it was a great game, so I'm not surprised to see a second installment. But the question is, does it live up to it? Is it better or worse? For starters, the plot of Death Hand Request 2 is quite different as it is more of a new story than a direct continuation of the first. Although there are some returning characters, you are now playing as a new protagonist called Mai. Her backstory is pretty dark and deals with heavy subject matters, so I'll leave it up to you to discover it. The story takes place at Wordsworth Academy, a boarding school for young girls with serious problems. There are a lot of characters, and just like the first game, Death Hand Request 2 is a mix of RPG and visual novel, so expect a lot of text to read. As you can see, the plot of the game changed quite a bit from the first game, which took place in a glitched virtual game world, while this one has a more realistic setting. But it's just as mysterious and dark, if not even darker. After arriving at the orphanage, Mai quickly figures out something is wrong with the village, as monsters roam the streets at night. In these sequences, you'll be exploring the very religious town of Choara in a typical RPG fashion, where you'll fight enemies and look for keys to open new paths. In this regard, Death Hand Request 2 does better than the first game, as the level layouts are much less confusing. In the original, it was extremely hard to find some of the key items. Now most of them are marked on the map, making it a lot easier to figure out where to go, although there are still times where the objective is not made very clear. The levels are also much larger than in the first game, which was made up of several different areas. In Death Hand Request 2, instead of separate areas, you have one large map with interconnected levels that you'll explore as the story unfolds. While I enjoyed the more open world levels, I found the areas very repetitive as they all look pretty much the same, and you'll be revisiting the same places over and over again. While the first game had some variety in the themes of the levels, the sequel only features a town, a forest, and a farm. That's a bit disappointing since the first game had twice as many areas, but at least the game looks great, with interesting visuals featuring otherworldly horror elements that add a lot of uniqueness to the look of the game. There's also a new element to the gameplay, a dark shadow who will chase you around the map. Coming in contact with it is instant death, so it adds a little bit of stress to the game as you explore around. Aside from that, there are also some PCs you can interact with to reveal hidden secret paths, but the feature is kind of wasted since you can see the invisible paths on your map whether you use the PC or not. Battle-wise, Death Hand Request 2 is still the same with the same fun battle system where you knock enemies around like a pool game in turn-based fashion. It was a blast in the first game, and it still is. Your characters can also still transform into glitch mode, which turn them into a cool-looking and more powerful version of themselves. Unfortunately, there's only 3 new characters to play as, and the cast from the first game is also playable later in the game, but they're not really part of the story, which makes it strange to play as them in battles. As mentioned previously, when you're not exploring the village or battling enemies, you'll be watching a lot of cutscenes. The story, although quite different from the first game, is still very good and well told. Just like in Death Hand Request 1, you'll sometimes have choices to make, and bad decisions will lead to gruesome game over screens. This was one of the best aspects of the first game, and still is, despite there being less death scenes this time. However, some of the deaths are even darker, and the artwork is awesome as always. The voice acting is also very good, but just like in the first game, there isn't a lot of it, as only the important main cutscenes are voiced, sadly. All in all, Death Hand Request 2 is a good sequel that takes what made the first game great and replicates it in a new setting with new characters, but that doesn't really improve anything. There are less areas to explore compared to the first game, and the levels are not exactly as interesting, but the story is well written and is a great example of how to blend horror and RPG together. It's also a little shorter than the first game, but I still had a lot of fun with the battle system, and I wouldn't mind a third installment. If you like horror, RPGs, and visual novels, then Dead End Request 2 is well worth playing.